Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Barry Smith.
Welcome to the Breaking Average Show. I am Paul Gustafson. I'm with Barry Smith. We are having so much fun already. We're into 2023. We're talking about our keywords. Talking about being, just getting simplified, right, Barry? How's that going for you?
Simplify. Hey, it's underway.
It is underway. It's a
simplification process is on its way, man.
It is a process, right?
Definitely.
So, and I do want to chat a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about this importance of the impact that we can make, anybody can make, in terms of pouring courage. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but really speaking life into other people. And, you and I were chatting before we hit the record. You asked me about Jay Kershaw, and I said, yeah, well, he's actually my uncle. Yeah, he was one of those guys that spoke life into me. So let's talk about that. What's the significance of speaking life into somebody, and why is that important? And who can do that? I mean, it's not age dependent, is it? Right? It's available for all of us to do that, to kind of make that impact.
Yeah, it's not. It's definitely not age dependent, because I think even our kids, we've got grandkids now, just a little over 2 and one about 5 months old. So it'll be fun first Christmas with both of them, right? But you look at the innocence and the curiosity of kids, and even when they throw out some jumbled up words, man, that to me, okay, that can speak life into me, just because there's nothing like it. As a coach, we depend a lot on being able to ask open-ended, powerful questions that are going to pull some curiosity out and help with that process. And so to see it with youth, they haven't been tainted yet by the world that we live in, and all the biases and everything that we create as time goes on. And so I think just listen to the innocence and the curiosity of kids can be pretty powerful, and certainly as adults, we have the opportunity to do that as well. But it takes maybe a little more work. Just kind of flows naturally out of kids. But for us, to be able to speak life into someone, that story takes time to shape, make it more powerful every time we tell one of those stories. So something I try and do. I love having it happen to me and love to be able to do that for others.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so key too, right? And it's the opportunity in front of every one of us as we move forward to start, even if it's a small step, even though we want to just change somebody or help them in a big way, we don't need to help them in a big way.
Yeah.
I think we get confused when we look for the big steps.
Yep.
And maybe if we kind of scale it back and look for the little steps. So you talked about coaching. I think that's a powerful tool. I think coaching is something that could equip everybody, equip all of us.
Oh, yeah.
And the speaking life into other people. So let's walk through that let's talk a little bit more about what coaching, and that is, we've had plenty of conversations, but how do we practically do that? How can anybody, no matter who they are, start to apply some coaching principles to speak life into other people?
Yeah, you bet. I love that question. And I'll go back now over a decade when I first started really understanding what the coaching process was all about. And I remember initially it really changed the way I communicated. One of the ideas is being listening at a high level, right? What some might call level 3 listening, where you're hearing not only what's being said, but what's not being said, right? The opportunity and really need to be fully present as a listener. I know one of the things before I became a student, I learned that, in hindsight, one of the things I was doing was not being a good listener and really trying to solve people's problems before I even knew what they were, and certainly this goes back in the construction world. That was part of my role. As a project manager, as a superintendent, my job was to solve problems and solve them fast and keep everybody going. And so that's kind of who I became, right? The problem solver. which was a good thing. But at the same time, that was my default. That was the assumption, the belief that I made every time somebody started talking to me. And so I found that I was really enabling people rather than empowering them. I was solving problems for them, not giving them the opportunity or the help or support to solve it on their own, so they could strengthen their own, muscles on making decisions and so forth. So it really helped me to become a better listener, a better communicator, and really changed that in every aspect of my life, not just as a coach, but as a spouse, as a father, as a son, as a, fill in the blank. Just communicating on that different level makes a pretty big difference in the way that we, interact with others.
Yeah, it sure does. And so, I mean, part of that, right? We're focusing in on listening. When we're talking about coaching, if we're not listening, we're not coaching.
Correct. Yeah, very well stated.
And I grew up in the sports mentality, and I had a different vision of a coach than what a real coach is supposed to do. And probably you did too, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when you have the coach, and I had some good coaches, so I don't want to discredit all my coaches. We talked about Coach Windsor. He was a great coach. He asked me questions. But I've had other coaches that would just tell me what to do. And they would tell me what to do. And they may even show me how to do it. But they wouldn't tell me why. And they wouldn't take time to understand my knowledge and awareness of the game or whatever the situation was. And that's, to me, the huge, it's subtle, but it's a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
When that coach says, well, what do you see? What's happening? What's your perspective? What's happening here? It kind of opens it up. It puts that challenge on that person and lets them see for themselves rather than somebody thinking for you. A coach is going to encourage you to think for yourself and be able to see that. And I think it's one of the most powerful gifts we can give somebody else is the ability not to speak into them to tell them what to do, but to speak into them so that they can see the options in front of them so that they know here's what I could do. What do you think about this? Oh yeah, those are good options. Right.
And then they learn it. Right. And then the transformation is going to come from within.
Yes.
And so whether you're a coach or not, you can use the coaching process, so to speak, by just, speaking into people, but you're hitting it spot on here. You've got to allow them to think into the answer, think into the change that needs to be made, or it's not going to do any good. You're right. There's a lot of coaches. Coaching, the word coach is, probably one of the most misused words in the English language or any language for that matter. I think if you ask 100 people what's a coach, you're probably going to get 100 different responses.
Yes.
And so, that's been part of my learning journey. Of how much we really need to honor what true coaching is. There's mentoring, there's training, there's teaching, there's a lot of different ways we can take in information and process it. But the coaching element, I think this is why I become so passionate about it, because that is the true way, the authentic way to become that agent of change for someone, where you're not doing it for them, you're empowering them to do what they need to do it on their own, and then do it beyond.
Yeah.
Even outside the coaching conversation, coaching can change lives, period. Once you're done. And that's the idea, to have that change. So I think, again, stepping out of the coaching lane and just being a person, we can speak life into people by challenging them and then, just asking some powerful open-ended questions and get them thinking into what they need to do to change their life for the better. It's funny because I work with a lot of new people to the Maxwell organization, right? We do a weekly kind of support call for new people getting started. And I tell them, they get stuck with this idea, whether they want to be a coach or a speaker or trainer, they get stuck that they've got to somehow get a bunch of clients before they can start applying these skills. And I said, no. You can start applying these skills you're learning right now. Mm-hmm. With your significant other, with your kids, with a coworker, with a neighbor. You can do that right now, and it will change the way you communicate. It absolutely will. So I get excited about that, to work with people and let them know the power of open-ended questions, and what they can do for you. So I think, again, that's part of the reason, I do what I do as a coach, because I love the process and I love the outcome.
It changes your whole mindset, doesn't it? When you get the coach mentality going and you realize, okay, I don't need to know all the answers to help somebody. Like
Right.
I had high school teachers who I know now, I didn't know it then, who probably walked into the room with fear and trepidation because they're trying to teach a whole classroom of teenagers, and they're trying to bring all the knowledge that they have, and they've probably stayed up until 11, 12 o'clock, whatever, over the last couple of days, just trying to bring the material in, especially those young teachers that haven't been there before. Yeah. And they're trying to teach it. And I didn't learn as much in those classes.
Isn't that interesting?
And those teachers weren't the best teachers. The best teachers I had were the ones who were asking questions in the room.
Yep.
And letting us think, ponder, use our imagination, right? Just kind of like history for me. I remember I had one teacher who just totally revolutionized history, because before it was just learning facts and figures and dates and people, and how boring. But then I had a teacher, and he would stand up he was the kind of guy to stand up on the chair. He didn't stand up on tables, but he would stand up on chairs, and he would articulate a story. He would share a story, and then he would ask some questions. And he wouldn't finish the story. He'd ask the question in the middle of the story. What do you think happened at that point? If you're dealt with that kind of challenge, he's talking about the founding fathers. He's talking about different things. And we're starting to put our mind into that scenario. But it was through the questions that allowed us to go like, wow, yeah, I can understand why Abraham Lincoln did that, or whomever it was. And we started to see these famous people, the monuments that weren't far from me, right? I grew up in Northern Virginia, understanding them in a whole new light. And it was the stories and the questions and painting that picture. It wasn't just learning stuff to take a test. So
love that, man. It's fun sometimes to step into those shoes.
It is.
And just, I get it. I love history. I love geography. But I get that if it's just about dates and people and places, okay, it's the stories, it's the reality of it, that just amazes me. I've been places with you, right? And you watch me, and I just look at things in awe. I remember walking around, I forget where we were at. You took me somewhere. I don't know if it was Gettysburg or somewhere you took me. And the buildings are like 1600s.
Yeah. No, yeah. I took you to Sunken Road here in Fredericksburg, where there was a big Civil War battle back in the day.
And just, somebody who's lived and grown up, most of their life in the Pacific Northwest, where, it kind of started with the Oregon Trail, which was hundreds of years after the buildings you're walking me around looking at.
Yeah.
And I just try and turn back the clock a half a century and think about what that was like, and I know, the TV dramas we have now in the movies, they all do kind of a pretty good job of recreating that. But to be in those times, definitely simpler times, but tougher times, it's just, I love stepping into that time and just kind of, trying to picture what it was like and how you made decisions. And I think there's just stuff to learn there. There were some pretty sharp dudes and gals back then too. And I think a lot to learn from leadership examples, and just, man, you talk about perseverance, man, what so many went through, and now, now it's like when we get a snowstorm or weather gets bad, it's like the whole world ends just because we can't travel 1,000 miles in 3 hours. It's just crazy.
It is crazy. Here's what's interesting. The word coach is a relatively new term within the last 100 years.
Yeah.
But the truth of it is that there's been coaches from the beginning of time. you know, you can go back from a biblical standpoint, we can go back through history, and we can see that there were different individuals who poured into others to help them.
Yeah.
And as you were sharing about some of the challenges, struggles that we all go through. I mean, you look at it, right? History is fascinating to me because there was some struggle that took place, and then there was a decision that happened, and it made the person, right? So they went through some kind of challenge. I wrote down this: seeking significance means that we have to go through a struggle, right? Yeah. Significance, we talked about that last time. That significance only happens if we experience a struggle, typically.
I think I agree with that. Yeah.
And you look at even the founding of this nation, there was a huge struggle, right? We would have never founded this nation if there wasn't the struggle that we had. We would have been another, entity of the United Kingdom, probably. Yep. But yeah. So what I'm finding interesting is they surrounded themselves with other coaches. They didn't call them coaches. They had mentors, yes. They had coaches. People would say, well, what do you think? Let's ponder. Let's ask questions. Let's think about what are the options that we have. Let's observe, orient, decide. Let's act. And it's pretty powerful when you think about the power of those questions. I think the listening element that you talked about, taking time to listen to somebody, that's the easy step. Like, okay, be present, be where your feet are. As somebody's sharing their struggle and they're going through a struggle, whether or not they're admitting to it or not, just allowing yourself to be there and supportive of that. And that's the second step. Listen, support. Once you support, then you can connect, you can coach. I think coaching comes, you don't coach until you go through that process of listening and being supportive. Then you coach.
Yeah, you've got to listen. I mean, we all recognize what that word means, but to truly do it, to be fully present in a conversation. I was listening to somebody, I don't know, here not too long ago, and they're saying we actually forget 50%. I mean, right off the bat, we forget 50% of what we read or what we hear.
Yeah.
Just boom, it's gone right away. I think it was one of the books we were going through, and the author was saying, you will immediately forget half of what you read in this book. It's just the reality of it. So to be truly present, listen, and look, this goes well beyond any kind of coaching. This tells people that you care.
Yes.
Whether it's a family member, a friend, a coworker, to really listen, keep your mouth closed, right? And let them finish. I know, again, this is something I work very hard to do, is to not interrupt, because that was kind of the way I used to be. And I don't like that, and I have the awareness now to pick up on that. I'll see people who just want to jump in and interject into the conversation. It drives me crazy. I don't necessarily say anything, but it tells me a lot about that person, right? Yeah. And so I've worked very hard not to be that guy. Now, do I still do it occasionally? Sure. But I try and not be that guy. I want to listen. I want to really hear what's being said so I can help in any way I can.
Yeah. And think about the tie to emotional intelligence. When we can get into that mindset of the listen and being supportive, it emotional intelligence, how do we raise our EQ? Well, one of the ways is, I think, is through those steps, because if we just take time to pause before we act and respond or step on somebody as they're sharing, then we're elevating our emotional.
Sure.
We're not jumping into the emotional element of how we want to react. We're like, okay. And maybe we can still acknowledge how we're feeling, but we're doing it internally, and we're just thinking through it. And then through the emotion, the positive element of that emotion, when we're supportive, and that second step after listen, then we can say, yeah, this is sort of, I'm thinking of her name. She wrote Dare to Lead. Help me out. What's her name? Great book on vulnerability. Brene Brown. Yeah. So Brene's talking about, the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
And if we can get into that empathy element of it, like, okay, understanding how somebody's feeling, kind of get in their shoes, at least hear them out, then we can be supportive of them and maybe coach them. My struggle, like you, Barry, early on was when I'd hear the problem, I'd want to fix it. Right? Well, here's how you fix it, honey.
Yeah.
I don't want you to fix my problem. I just wanted you to know what was going on. You don't need to fix everything for me.
So true. So
Right?
true.
How many guys have heard that from their spouses?
Yes.
Right?
I just need someone to listen to me. And
Yeah.
we laugh, about our wives or significant others in that sense, but it's us guys too. We try and act all tough and macho, but at the end of the day, we want to be heard. We want to know that people care about us. And sometimes that's, just for someone to listen in. You've been that guy for me in the past. So,
Yeah.
it's the reality for everybody.
It is. It is. But I think it's such a huge opportunity, especially early part of 2023, in terms of what we can do to speak life. And I love the brand name for your company, right? When you started this thing off, building what matters.
Yeah.
And as you're sharing, I'm thinking back, I can almost envision myself seeing a young Barry Smith in the construction world. And there's a requirement that comes, right? A customer, a need. And you probably had to learn to understand what those requirements are before you went and built anything, right?
Great point.
Because, and I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen with home builders. They're like, oh, they think they understand what the needs are, the wants, and they just make a presumption. They're like, okay, I think I know what you want, but I'll go fix it. No, that's not what I wanted. But you had to take time to kind of understand that.
Yeah.
And then, but what is build what matter? Why did you choose that name, and what does that mean for the rest of us?
Oh, it's funny. So we're turning back the clock here now to 2011. I was still, full-time, two full times really in construction. I knew I needed to make some kind of change. And so, hey, if I'm going to, start doing some stuff on personal development and traveling and, maybe want to generate some other revenue, let's actually, do it legit, get a business put together. So the idea actually came from my pastor at the time, did a sermon called Building What Matters. And so, right there, top of the sermon notes, building what matters. And so I don't know, I don't remember this specific moment, but somewhere shortly after that sermon, it just kind of jumped out at me. And I called him up. I said, Reed, man, can I use that? Can I use that for my business name? He says, it's just a sermon title. You can use it all you want. And so it really started there. And the reason I love that initially was because even though I felt like I was going to, eventually going, my future very unclear at that time, but I knew I wanted to stay connected to the construction world somehow. I've shared this with you before. I've always been a builder, always been some kind of builder. Go back to when I could first pick up a hammer and a saw, I was building something, right? They didn't look so good when I was like 6 or 7, but
yeah,
that changed. And so as guys, we typically have those initial conversations. What do you do? And, for 30 years, I'm in construction. For the most part, it was civil construction. And so shortly thereafter, what do you do? I'm in construction. Oh, what do you build, people? And you get this funny look. And so I've just had some great conversations, and it gives me a chance to kind of talk about my journey of, what I did for, really half my life. Right.
Yeah.
And now I'm still in a building world, still in a construction world, but I build people. And so that gives me an opportunity to talk about what I do in the coaching process, mentoring. At the end of the day, this is the most important thing, the people around us. It's one thing, it's all we have, really.
Yeah.
We can have stuff, but does that stuff really matter if we've got no people around us? No people that matter. Everything I do in the business world is filtered through that idea of how am I helping to build this person. In any training I do, whether it's a group training or one-on-one coaching session, it's all about how am I helping to build this person. And the best thing you can do as a coach or just as a friend is empower people to make good decisions on their own. What if everybody just made good decisions by default? What kind of world would that be? That'd be pretty good. And look at what our politicians just made good decisions. Yeah. How would that be? How would that change the world we live in?
Yeah.
Right. So it's just, I build what matters, people. It's no more, no less, kind of pull from some John Maxwell quote. But it really is. People are everything. When you have nothing else, if you've got people, you're fine. It's funny. I asked, I've shared Cheryl's grandfather, 105 years old now, Poppy, sharp as a tack. But I love talking to him, all the experiences he's been through.
Yeah.
And when we were going through the pandemic, he was saying, Poppy, what's this like? Because he was in lockdown. He's a very nice kind of assisted, live on your own type place, but you can go downstairs and meals and games and, things like that. So he's in a real nice place up north of Orlando in the Villages. I said, Poppy, what's this like? Because they were bringing food to the rooms, and he couldn't go out anywhere. And he says, this is worse than the Depression. And I was like, whoa, what? How could this be, something you and I never experienced? We've only read about.
Yeah.
But how could this be worse than the Depression? And he said, because in the Depression, we didn't have anything, but we could go out in the street and throw a ball or kick a can. We had each other. And I was just like, wow. So that, that's a story I'm sure I'll share a number of times in the future, but it just amplifies the point that people matter. If you've got people you love that you care about around you, you got everything, in my opinion. Everything else is kind of a bonus.
Yeah.
But if you've got what matters, people around you, it's life's a lot more enjoyable journey.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Still gonna have some bumps. There's no doubt about that. But when you got people right there to just pat you on the shoulder or give you a hug or say it's okay, we'll get through this. That's what we got to have. It's being alone is where I think people get into trouble. That isolation is brutal.
I think it's and the opportunities are right there. I just love where we're going with this thing because first of all, what you're saying is, hey, look, this isn't just my business, this is what I'm doing. You're really making this a call to action for all of us. Hey guys, let's go build what matters, all of us. That's what I'm sensing.
Absolutely. And again, this is where you don't have to be a coach. You don't have to be a mentor. You don't need those things to encourage and empower people. It could be just, helping them build their self-confidence, telling them they're okay. Don't become a victim with them, right?
Ah, yes.
Don't tolerate that.
Don't let your empathy take you down to that level of victim.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you need to light them up. What do you think? And get yourself out of the, the hole you're in and quit complaining. You don't necessarily have to go down that road, but you don't have to come into, I'll pull from Paul Martinelli here. You don't have to come into agreement with their self-limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been Paul's, one of his big phrases for everybody he's worked with. I will never come into agreement with your self-limiting beliefs. And that in itself, if you think about it, is empowering to other people because you're not supporting that negative trend.
I love that. I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I just, again, it just goes back to how am I adding value to anybody I'm around? That was one thing. Initially, my focus was on the business side of it, right? From a coaching session that I want to get done, then I can go back to, how I want to be and so forth. But over time, it's really changed me to, any environment, any person I'm talking with. And yes, I can't say I'm 100% accurate at this and always come through. I have my moments just like anybody, but I'm always trying to figure out a way, how can I add value to this person? How can I help build them up? make their day better, do something that's lasting. Again, I think last time we talked about kind of the idea of success versus significance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how can you help a person become significant?
That's right.
Because it starts from within. And so you got to build that person. Whatever you do in life, business wise, it starts from within. John Maxwell, he'll be the first one to tell you all the success and significance he's seen in his life. It's all because of the relationships he's built along the way.
Yeah.
And that's where it's come from. And so if you want to have great people in your life, help build them.
Help build them. Help build them. I love that. It's a call to action for all of us. Thank you, Barry. A couple of thoughts here. I wrote down a bunch of things here. One of the most powerful questions that I've discovered to ask somebody without falling into the victim floor, right? Like if they're there, they're falling in the basement, and yes, you want to be there with them to support them, but it doesn't mean that you need to put that same victim type mentality on. This is where coaching, I think, really helps, because I believe my wife, when we were dating, she taught me this. I believe we all have hope inside of us, even though it may be locked away. We may not see it initially. Maybe we're clouded with all the doubt, the fear, the apprehensions, but there's still hope in each and every one of us. The question that we can ask is, hey, what do you hope for?
Love it.
What do you hope for? What's the hope that you have? What would you hope for in this situation? And they at least get to express it. They begin to see more of, even though they're in that state of victim-like thinking, maybe. But if you ask the hope question, they can start to see a way out. And that's where we can support them, right? We're trying to support them. Yes, we listen, but then we support. Well, we support them by showing them maybe the opportunities that are still there, that we can go forward and see, wow, there's still something there in front of us that we can go chase down. I still have hope. Yes, I still have hope. I used to ask this question when I was younger, and I don't think it's a good question, but I just want to ask. Here it is. Here's another question I used to ask. At that time we were dating, or whomever I was with, I used to ask them a question if it was some silence. And I'm like, hey, what are you thinking? Have you ever asked that question of somebody, like of Cheryl, like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think and I don't think that's a bad question. I think it becomes a better question when you put some context to it.
When you put some context to it.
What are you thinking about, fill in the blank? What are you thinking about our schedule for tomorrow? What are you thinking about, what our trip coming up to go see the kids?
Yeah.
And because of that's a better question, right?
Because I think it is a better question, because if you just leave it dry like that, what are you thinking about, without being specific in terms of an area, then the mind might wander into the negative, the doubt, the fear, the apprehension, the world is falling, it's negative 20 degrees, everything sucks kind of discussion. And do you really want to go there?
Really?
So I like that question that you say, well, extend it. It's not about what are you thinking about right now? Don't ask it that way. Ask it, if you're going to ask it, like your point, hey, what do you think about tomorrow? What, the opportunity to see such and such, or that's going to be great, right? Cast that vision. Ask a question that casts a vision that lets them paint the future in their mind.
Yeah.
So
I think that's, again, pull them back into that positive thinking. We're all guilty of stinking thinking sometimes. And typically when that question that gets asked, right, that you just referenced, it's because we pick up on something.
That's right.
Like they're, just staring out into nowhere, or they're just head down.
Yep.
And what are you thinking right now? What's going on? So that, there's maybe a time to pull that out, but I think there's also time to kind of redirect, and let's go down a happy path here for a little bit.
Yeah. Let's get you out of the ditch. Come on. So, yeah. And one of the questions that I think is really good, and you don't want to ask this until it's time, is, well, what's your next step?
Mm.
All right. And you want to look at it from a step standpoint, I think, Barry, because if you ask, well, what are the things that you need to do? The things that you need to do. If somebody asks me that question, I start thinking of the whole process and I'm like, wow, that's overwhelming. That's a lot of stuff. I don't know. I don't even know how to think. But if you just ask me, well, what's your next step?
Yep.
You know what? I think the next step is to make my bed or put my socks on or whatever small little thing that needs to be done. It's a simple question. It's a good question, but it's got to be asked at the right moment.
I love that one. That's a true coaching insight there.
Yeah.
Goes right. What do you need to do? Oh my gosh, like you say, it's like I got 100 different things I got to do. What's the next step?
Yeah.
And way better question. What are you going to do in the next week? What are you going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
And it puts, I've talked about my idea of kind of taking life in 5-week chunks with you, a number of times. And it gives you more control over what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
it helps narrow the focus. So you're not trying to process as much information. And, part of what goes along with that 5 weeks is once you kind of dial that in, then you bring it back to a week.
That's
Right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got it, and you just, you lay it out the best you can. And then come back to this week and nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Just focus on what you got going this week. And it works. It works.
That's powerful. Yeah. And I think, I wrote down the other thing that you and I've talked about, when we get in the mentality, like, oh, I've got to go do this. I've got to do that. I've got to do this. If we change our mindset, hey, here's what I get to do.
Yeah.
I get to speak into somebody. We talked just last podcast on this, but it's so important to change that frame, change the words. And it really gets into this other element that I want to talk about real quick. We're talking about speaking life into other people. The opportunity, Barry, for everybody, guys, is to speak life in your own soul.
Yeah.
Okay. You can coach yourself up too. I love the idea of self-coaching. And it's probably maybe a bit different for a lot of people because, we struggle with it. We have that inner voice. We have that playlist that plays. It reminds us of what we can't do and shouldn't do and won't do, and the fear and the doubt. But there is another voice within you that's strong. It's vibrant, and call on that. Ask yourself the same questions that you might support somebody else. You can ask them of yourself. You can coach yourself up. And look how far we've talked about the gap and the gains, right, Barry? Look how far you've come. You haven't come this far only to come just this far. You still got a way to go, but you've come this far for a reason. And recognize who you are, that you are uniquely qualified and gifted and part of the plan. You have a purpose. You have a cause, and discover what that is. What do you hope for? What is it that you hope for? In Barry's case, he's got a powerful message. He hopes to build up others, build what matters. And I love that concept. It's really a call to action for all of us. But with that, I mean, it's probably gotten you out of some ditches a few times when you remind yourself of what your why is, right, Barry?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, there's times when I feel like I've got an advantage because of that skill set that I've developed. And there's other times when honestly, I completely forget about it. I think I shared with you last time or one of our previous episodes that I really lived, last October in the gap.
Yeah.
And I have to laugh at myself because I can just, I'm in a coaching session and I'm, encouraging someone, sharing, a process or a plan or, what are they thinking about at the time? And okay, why do you feel that way? And then I reflect and it's like that's me. right? I was that guy this week or this month or
Yeah.
today. And so there is that certain amount of integrity that you got to maintain, but at the same time, being authentic. That's why everybody needs a coach. Every coach needs a coach. Every coach probably needs a coach more so than anybody else, just because they need to be in the participant's seat and experience that transformation within themselves and be reminded. And I'll tell you, as much as yes, there's elements of coaching yourself up, there's nothing as powerful as getting into that real conversation with someone. There's just something about speaking out loud. And, I'm one of those guys who likes to think out loud, right? Well, most of my thinking out loud is silent until I get in that coaching relationship, and then it's out loud. And the difference it makes is amazing. But it takes that someone on the other side. We can only do so much on our own. It doesn't matter how good, how focused we are. We're still looking through our lens, our set of eyes, and that's the only thing we'll see. So you get somebody else, listening in, taking a look at where we're coming from. Man, it blows me away.
Yeah. So good.
So be that person. My encouragement to everybody is be that person for somebody else.
Yeah.
Ask those questions, listen intently, be fully present. Man, you can make a huge difference in someone's life. There's people who don't have that at all. No one listens to them. What do you think that does to their confidence?
Yeah.
How have you ever heard anybody say, "Well, nobody listened to me"? Well, maybe nobody has. And maybe that's partially your responsibility. Do you listen to them? Is it a reciprocal relationship? I don't know. I think I do. Well, start things. Try listening. If you think you might be this person, start with this. Start working on yourself. Become a better listener. Things will change. Things will change.
And listen to what's going on in your mind, and as you hear the negative talk, right? As from the self-coach standpoint too, because we have those thoughts that just kind of run us dry. Challenge those thoughts. You brought up something earlier from Paul Martinelli. This is a power question that we can ask others as a coach, and the opportunity for us to coach somebody else, and we can ask ourselves. And it's this: what limiting beliefs are holding you back?
Yeah.
What limiting beliefs are holding me back? I should ask that question, and I do, but we should ask it with some frequency, right? And we could ask somebody else that question too, but don't start there. Don't start with that question. Understand them, hear them, listen, support. Then when you're ready, when you know that, okay, all right, they're talking, they're sharing, they can start to admit, we can start to admit to what those limiting beliefs are. And it's a power question. So
yeah, and we all deal with them. Every one of us has self-limiting beliefs. Even the top coaching guys in the world and mentors. Everybody's got those self-limiting beliefs. Some just deal with them a little bit better. Some know how to overcome them. Some know that, hey man, I gotta call my coach. I gotta call my mentor. I'm suffering with this right now. It's the biggest challenge, in my opinion. It's the biggest challenge we deal with in the coaching industry. Those that are authentically coaching, is people's self-limiting beliefs. Had a session this week with a gal, an amazing gal, probably one of the sharpest, most accomplished people I've ever met in my life. And there's just some self-limiting beliefs about self-worth in there, which we can say, oh my gosh, that's just ridiculous, but it's not. It's a reality of how we all process life as we live through it. We all of us can come up with some way we're falling short.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
And most of that is created in our own mind. And that's, as a coach, is what, deal with almost everybody and ourselves. Most of the things that we think are wrong are created in our own mind, or things that we accept that, aren't necessarily true. I forget who said it, but the basic comment in the quote was 5% of all the things I worry about actually happen. And there's so much truth to that. We spend so much time thinking playing the what if game. Forget the what if game. Get out there and go. Now I know you're kind of in the what if industry, so I'm not talking about that with simulations and so forth. You have to play that in some places, but we play it with life. Well, what if this happened? What if that happened? Well, I love what Peter Drucker said. The best way to predict the future is go out and create it.
That's right.
One of my favorite quotes, man. One of my favorite quotes. Best way to predict the future is create it. That's so powerful to me.
Absolutely.
Beautiful quote.
I got one more question that I think is going to be a powerful question for coaches and for maybe for yourself too. So when someone shares what those limiting beliefs are, don't just acknowledge them. Say, yeah, those are limiting beliefs. I hear it all the time when I watch football or whatever sport it is, they're talking about an athlete. Well, they just can't score in the red dime. They never score. I hear the word never or always, or, the strong, absolute words that aren't true, limiting beliefs. But the question that I think is the follow-up question, to encourage somebody to speak life into somebody, it's the one that my dad spoke into me when I was just a kid trying to learn how to ride a bicycle. And I had a limiting belief that, well, maybe I can't. Maybe I'm the one kid on this planet that's not going to ever learn how to ride a bicycle. And he looks at me, hands on the handlebars, staring straight at me and says, who says that you can't?
Yeah.
Who says that you can't? So when somebody shares their limiting beliefs, I can never do this. I can never do that. Well, who says that you can't? Well, maybe I'm saying that to myself. Well, yeah, maybe you are. Maybe that's not true because you can do it. Who says that you can't? It's the same comment that Herb Brooks did to the 1980 Olympic hockey team before they beat Finland and Russia and then Finland. Who says that you can't? You're made for this moment. And that's the opportunity in front. That's how we speak life. So let's end on a tip and challenge. This is so good. I love this conversation, and I hope this encourages people.
No, I was gonna add that one of the questions I like to ask when someone brings forth a self-limiting belief is, what evidence is there of that? To your what if I can't? What if I can't? What if I'm not one kid? Well, what evidence is there that you're the only person that won't be able to ride a bike? And typically you'll just get that. Oh, well, I guess there really isn't any of it evidence. Oh, okay. So what's going on? Tip and challenge. I think the tip is you don't have to be a coach to coach people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel like you got to paint yourself in that box. You can listen intently. I mean, these are the two core elements of great coaching: listening intently, being fully present, and asking good, powerful, open-ended questions.
Yeah.
So do you have to be a coach? Do you have to have a coach coaching clients? Do you have to be able to use those two skills? No, you don't. So my tip is you don't have to be a coach to coach. The challenge, I think the challenge right now for any of us, just work on your listening skills. Yeah. You make this, if 2023 is going to be your best year ever, and I hold that vision for everybody. I think part of that should become a better listener, better communicator. That John Maxwell guy that we know and love, coming out with a new book in March. I believe it's the 16 indispensable.
Yeah.
Indispensable or indisputable laws of communication.
That's right.
Going to be outstanding.
Going to be good.
I hope everybody has it on their list for this year. We all need to be better communicators. And I think I've shared in here before, I think 95% of leadership failures are communication. That's what I read that Colin Powell. I forgot what book it was, but Colin Powell was a quote from Colin Powell. 95% of leadership failures are communication failures. So if you want 2023 to be your best year, improve your communication skills.
I love it. So good. Good tip and challenge. Thank you, Barry. There's so much here. I'm going to share a quote from Toby Mac, a song called Speak Life. And I love this lyric. He says, "It's crazy to imagine words from our lips as the arms of compassion, but look into the eyes of the brokenhearted. Watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, you speak love, you speak life. And that's the opportunity for us. That's a mission for every one of us, whether you're a coach or you're just somebody who wants to make an impact in somebody else's life, because you can take these coaching principles that Barry and I have been talking about, and you can make them happen for those around you. You can speak life to those in your circle, those maybe not even in your circle that you just encounter and meet along the way. Speak life into them. What a great impact that you have. Barry just talked about communication. The most important communication is that you matter. Is that statement, right? That thought, not just the statement, but just expressing to them, hey, look, you matter. And when we show that they matter, when others matter, that maybe even to ourselves that we matter, boy, we're going to speak some life. And when we speak life, boy, we can make an impact. And I just want to encourage everybody to do that. Like Barry said, 2023 could be your best year ever. And just recognize the significance, back to that word that we shared last week, the significance of doing that one small step, speaking life. So thank you guys for watching, listening. Check us out on breakingaverage.com. Go to Barry's website, Building What Matters. Just so thrilled that you guys watch and listen. So Barry, great episode, man. What do you think?
I go back to what you said early on about everybody having hope somewhere inside, right? And maybe life comes and kind of covers it up. You forget about it. But I love that statement because I believe it too. There is hope in there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes all we need to do is speak some life into someone and help them pull that hope back out. So there you go, man. We got our work cut out for us. Let's go out and build what matters, people.
Let's do it. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.